Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi, everyone. Hello, friends. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. Consciousness. What is it? Where does it come from? How does it work? Well, a lot of these terms, as we go through the Buddhism reference book that I'm putting together, even though I'm trying to keep them concise, so they're just a reference material, right? I'll remind again, for those of you who are new, and those of you who may not have heard it before, on the home page of this channel on YouTube, there's a separate search, a little magnifying glass in the middle of the page, well, off to the right, next to, where the little menu is that says videos, playlists, about. Right next to about, there's a little magnifying glass. Not the top search, but that magnifying glass searches only within this channel. Because there's hundreds and hundreds of videos on this channel. So, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to go by the titles and scan through all of them to find what you might be curious about or wanting more information on, yeah? So a term like consciousness in that search criteria will give you a result set, and there'll be several, but not that many, that have that word either in the title or in the description. So you can begin to start digging if you learn well through podcasts or the videos, and you'll have more involved discussion on all of these things. Some of them will be in Gosho. Some of them will be in other sutras. Some of them will be standalone on consciousness. And so that's good. You get a lot of perspectives, right, to help your confidence and your understanding and your insights. So please make use of that tool on the channel. We're not going to hit it from every single side here. The book is going to have consciousness, the 9 consciousnesses, the Skandhas, which are consciousnesses. So this topic's going to be hit on several different ways within the book, rather than trying to define everything in one term, because then we're making videos again, yeah? All right. So thank you for your practice. Thank you for being here today. Consciousness. And we'll start with 3 basic descriptions and a 4th, which is just a reference. The first is the emergent quality of observation of the process of data collection in the brain. And you've heard me talk a lot about the brain being a phenomenal data collector, identifier, categorizer, discriminator, right? This is our really powerful samsaric engine of identification. Because as we identify something other than self, we are, ipso facto, if you will, identifying who we are or who we think we are. That may not be what we think when we say that's a chair, but in fact, our brain is saying, that is not me, that is a chair, and because I know that's a chair, it is, in a way, my chair, because it identifies me as not chair. It's complex. It's even more complex than that, but always think in this bi-directional way. It is the duality of samsara, right? So Buddhism identifies that identification process as the very thing from which our anxieties and stress come from. Because then we have to manage that huge database of data points, right? And we want more of them, less of them, keep them. Oh, they're aging, they're, right? Because everything arises, abides and decays, and then dissolves, goes away, goes extinct, if you will. And we know this intrinsically. Our Buddha nature is inherent, but we don't think of that in samsara. We just worry, right? That's suffering. That's life, yeah? Number 2, sentient processes based on input receptors in example. sensory organs of the eyes, ears, flesh, nerves, etc. Right? So in Buddhism, we recognize consciousnesses not only as the overall ability to witness, to observe, right? Let alone our samsaric subjective use of that skill or that ability, that function. But we have the ability to be objective. It's not a very well trained ability, but it's tied more towards our Buddha-ness, isn't it? Right? Because to be objective is to see things impersonally, we think, without defining self. Although, as you know, even in our samsaric objectivity, we are once removed, but still, with that removal, identifying self. We're pretty clever. But those consciousnesses are related to our sensory organs, the receptors of the brain. So that consciousness emerges from the relationship between this ocular thing we call an eyeball and the way that it sends information, light information, through nerve impulses, through a nerve, right, to the brain, where it's sorted, and the brain does these little comparisons and discriminations and says blue, not green, less yellow, more red, and beyond that, the physical properties, right, as we know in Buddhism, the 10 factors, it adjudicates what in the database that represents, what we've assigned it to be. And sometimes we're confused because we have something is new, we haven't seen it before. So we have to then go parameterize it, see it, weigh it, touch it, measure it. And then we create this database of knowledge about this thing. It's an immense database, right? Almost unfathomable, really unfathomable. And I talk about that database all the time, and the fact that that database is kept in a warehouse of just endless shelves of data, right? And somebody has to manage that data, right? That's our samsaric processes and those lower consciousnesses. The organizers and keepers and stressors and blah, blah, blah. The third is the basis of experience, right? The brain collects the data, but it's the mind, the consciousness of the observer of this process that decides how to feel about it, right? Right? You get burned, you sizzle your skin, it hurts, you make a database entry of all of that, but then your consciousness, your mind says, that is not something I enjoy. Therefore, when this data reappears or emerges in a form where it portends to happen, I will resist that engagement because I remember or I have a catalog of the damage and the suffering that caused, right? So there's a relationship between the data, the warehouse, and the warehouse managers who make decisions about the experience of the data. That's a little different. And we can argue all day long about whether that's chemical and biological in the brain or if that's an emergent process, brain or not, that is a different level, a different and in fact, a lot of illustrations of the consciousnesses in Buddhism are either circles or triangles. You've seen me do videos and illustrate these things. That's how we use language and pictures to communicate ideas, right? But understand these are the consciousnesses are transient things, whereas the database, other than brain injury or decay, is a locked-in neural like a flash drive or whatever. That's rudimentary analogy. And the fourth thing I mentioned here is see also nine consciousnesses. So obviously in the nine consciousnesses, the totality of consciousnesses discussed in Buddhism for our modern practice will have more information on how this amazing mind of ours works and its innate ability to see reality without attachment, without self-reference, right? To just see it as it functions, as it works, as it appears and decays. The actual engine of life, right? Which would be our experience of the ninth consciousness. So let's get there. Without consciousnesses, the brain is left to collect comparative data through sensory inputs alone in the primal pursuits of food, sex, self-protection, and shelter, right? What people sometimes refer to as the lizard brain or the rudimentary brain. But make no mistakes, it's not that there's a particular spot in the brain that holds all of this ancient information. It's just the process of the way the brain works, okay? And it makes certain decisions at a very fundamental, rudimentary level. Study the word epistemology. You'll be fascinated. Epistemology is, to make it simple, the process of our database collecting, going from data to information. In other words, meaningful in some way to our experience of life. Yeah? Epistemology, interesting term. And it'll open your mind a little bit, no pun intended, to the way the brain processes and how we think, quote unquote, right? Buddhism does this, so looking in other sciences and other terms at an analysis of the same processes can be useful, can lead to insights, yeah? All right. Analytics are rudimentary, as in decisions of the moment for fight or flight, right? Prey versus predator, mate or competition, and so on. Without consciousness, attitude is irrelevant, and intent is singular and straightforward. What do I mean by that? How you feel about the ham and cheese sandwich, right? What you plan to do with it other than eat it or not. Attitude it's not a very big player at this level, yeah? But intent, I need to eat, there's food, I'm going to eat it, right? It's very straightforward, very singular. But when we talk about attitude and intent, as we have already, we're taking in the scope of the mind, not just the rudimentary access of our sensory organs and consciousnesses at that level. So Buddhism, it talks about these things at different points during Shakyamuni's teachings. They get more or less involved. Certainly in the perfection of wisdom, we're not talking about these. They're part of it, right? I mean, you can't step up a ladder without starting on the lower rungs, unless you can fly, right? So it's a building upon. And the perfection of wisdom is much more concerned with the way we churn our information as from subjective to objective, and the insights that come from that, right? And the promotion of detachment, because as an objective observer, we distance ourselves more and more from the self-identification of the experience of life, right? Lots of words. Consciousness is a biggie. Important to understand, though, because we'll keep coming back to it, as Nichiren does, that if you delve in, and you don't have to be like an expert, but if you just delve in to swim in the conversation of consciousnesses, when we get to 3,000 realms in a single thought moment, it's a much more profound idea when you have some clue as to how how many tendrils of potential, right? How it mechanizes our thoughts. All right. Bodhisattva Vasubandhu spent a great deal of his life on the study and discriminations of the first 5 consciousnesses of the 9 of Buddhism. In relation to the 5, in fact, in his day, they hadn't conceived of 9 consciousnesses yet. His whole focus was the first 5 sense organs, senses, and the way they've developed and co-developed consciousnesses around the physical aspects of the sense organs. And Vasubandhu's study is exhaustive, just as Nagarjuna's was, yeah? And of course, the Skandhas, or the 5 aggregates, you can use either term, are also a term in this book. Once established as primary karmic constructs, there's a whole lot of words you might want to look up there, additional consciousnesses arise in relation to the activities of these initial 5. The 6th consciousness, for instance, arises the data and discriminations of the first 5. In other words, it's more of a purview of those 5 sensory organs, what we would call the mind, before Buddhism, or not before Buddhism, but before our exposure to the teachings of Buddhism. You would talk about the 6th sense, or the mind as another sense entirely, the one that kind of oversees and puts together what the other 5, sight, hearing, taste, smell, so on, are collecting. As the skandhas pile up data on the shelves of the brain, the warehouse, yeah, the 6th, or mano consciousness, organizes, evaluates our collections of characteristics like a warehouse manager keeps the database in order. These 6 consciousnesses are responsible for the vast amount of cataloging and creating our real samsaric world. That's our 6 lower worlds, right? Just simply identifying everything. That's why the 6th world is, I think it's humanity, Nin, right? We got it all under control. Once the warehouse is established, and it continues to grow, right, there emerges the sense of situational awareness with the business of identifying ourself as a representation and entity of the warehouse, amongst other warehouses and environmental elements. This 7th mano, same name, but a 7th consciousness, shares the naming of the 6th with the notable difference that it is concerned with the environment of the warehouse in relation to the warehouse as a comparative and personally identified self. So not just who am I, but who am I amongst others. This reinforcement of self and other goes from personal to impersonal environment, yeah? This is one of the first stumbling blocks for us to understand that there really is no separation between self and environment, because samsarically, that's all we do all day long is identify our separateness from it. So, to continue, consider the environment in relation to the warehouse, comparative self in relation to the source of the sensory inputs and the environment. Some term this spiritual aspect of mind, as it is a construction of the constructions of the previous consciousnesses. This would be a samsaric interpretation, though, based solely on the physical world of attachments and identifications, right? So spiritual is one of those weird, wishy-washy words. It depends on who you are, what you mean by it, what you were exposed to at growing up. You know, for some people, the word spiritual is immediately about gods and universal forces and other things, whereas for most Buddhists, it's more about mental processes. What are we doing in there, right, in our mind? But, I prefer just to stay away from the word because it has too much charisma attached to it. Anyway, to go on. Finally, within the samsaric framework of the 8 consciousnesses, the alaya, or the 8th, consciousness is a more abstract and fundamental collection of initial conditions and tendencies initiated in the birth process. Now, we talked about this in birth. This 8th consciousness, some people call it the karmic repository. It's like another database, right? But it's, remember, we're momentum. We're constantly moving. Nothing is static. So as much as our samsaric mind is collecting data and making a picture of self and environment, right, the physical world, sorry about that, our alaya consciousness has a starting point of all of the energies, the amalgams of energies that working together joined in with your mother and father, or egg and sperm, to instantiate your starting point. This is the karma, the energy, your freight train beginning and developing in the womb, birthing. And even in the womb, you're experiencing, your karmic freight train is experiencing new things, right? The beginnings of your physical appearance, your heartbeat, right? Your intake of food, your feeling warm and safe. All of these things begin in the womb, right? So your database is already accruing data and information. And so is your karmic database. Your karmic database, massive as it is being influenced by cause and effect, by the new data being input. Is it revolutionary data? Is it a huge influence, or is it a tiny influence? Is it just a little trickle of data that's just a small modifier? As you grow as an adult, do you fall off the swings and break your arm? That's a strong identifier. That's a strong imposition on your karmic freight train, right? You see a butterfly and it makes you feel joyful. And that's a small, or maybe it depends on you. It depends on your karmic freight train, doesn't it? So this is our discussion of karma. Karma is this freight train of energy, momentum, moving through time-space, constantly being molded, modified, pushed, influenced by moment to moment, 3,000 realms in a single thought moment, through time. So, the alaya consciousness is a more abstract, fundamental collection of conditions. This is known as the karmic repository. That is a full spectrum of energies instantiating together into a physical and mental expression of potentials parameterized by their constituent kinetics in a unified momentum through time-space and identified by the 7th consciousness as the unique self. So you see the interrelationship here? The first consciousnesses feed a larger conscious, the manager, right? And the manager talks to the supervisor, the guy who owns the warehouse, and the 7th consciousness says, this is who we are amongst in the world. And this repository, this 8th consciousness, informs the 7th consciousness by way of its tendencies and conditions, like a big freight train, right? Which is constantly being affected and modified, but only in little ways. Maybe you repaint the safety stripes on the stairs of the engine of the freight train, right? That doesn't really change the freight train a whole lot, right? You got to change the rails it's running on if you want to make major changes, karmic changes, karmic directions, really. Right? It's always an influence because everything's moving. Nothing is static. So, Taken altogether, these 8 consciousnesses define our experience of individuation and unique beings in samsara. All well and good. Now we understand sentient mind, human being, and all of the factors that create that sense, that experience of being, right? What most people would just call consciousness. Last paragraph. Ultimately, Buddhist practice is designed to awaken a 9th consciousness, to transcend these 8 consciousnesses, or maybe embrace them, as I've shown before, which have excluded or rendered dormant this Amala consciousness of non-differentiated, non-individuated life, as the process from which all phenomena are manifest, right? This 9th, or Amala consciousness, is an experience of the totality of life and the engine that produces it. The Amala consciousness envelops the whole of all the various warehouses of identity and the lower 8 consciousnesses to demonstrate the futility of identity as a measure of life, right? Because there's an ideation there that our self, our parameterized conscious construct of self, is life. But in reality, life is the totality of the universe, the whole process. And we are but an instantiation of that life, right? In fact, the moments, this is where Buddhism goes, as soon as you get that insight that life is everything and we are a package, if you will, of tendencies and conditions of this whole process, right? That even as we move through time, moment to moment to moment, the moments themselves are birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Right? It's fascinating. Buddhism just, it's like math in a way. It just dissects and dissects and dissects. Not to say, hey, look how brilliant we are, but if you can understand something at the granular level, right, the sands of the Ganges, your mind gets unstuck from these larger ideas, and you begin to see how everything is just quanta, right? Just little sparks of energy. Everything. Identity, with its demand for possessions, precipitates all manner of stresses, anxieties to maintain this status quo of a self, while the Amala sees no need for such constructs and simply allows the experience of life to be the only entity shared by all phenomena in what is called equanimity. I just realized I don't think I have an entry in this book for equanimity. That's an important one. I got to get back to work. And then it sees C9 consciousnesses. But now equanimity, we'll have to talk about that. We're not in the E's yet, so I have time to put it in here before we get to it. Anyway, that's a lot of words, and I apologize if it seems a little bit word salady. But if you take it apart, chunk by chunk, each of these I could have written, and I have written and done entire videos and written books about, a whole series of videos on the origins of life that I did many years ago on the 3,000 Realms. I don't even remember how many videos that was, but yeah, we could talk and talk and talk about it. And maybe one day we'll have the opportunity to sit around a fire and outside and just be casual and let our minds rip on this concept. But what's important is that you realize that everything is about the way we influence our tendencies and conditions. Life is just an expression of energy. And your expression of energy and my expression of energy are very similar, but they're different. And so more and more we learn to appreciate, oh, look at that difference. That's amazing. And it's not me, but it is me, because we're all the same stuff. It's just amazing how many different ways it expresses itself. And when we understand that, then we're not so separate anymore. We're different. That's okay. It's beautiful. But we're all made of the same stuff. So that there's an equanimity in that. There's not a better or lesser, right? There's not a good or bad or good or evil. I know those words are used all the time, especially in the Western translations. It drives me mad. But equanimity is the vision of Buddha-ness. And just considering that for a moment, isn't that calming? Right? It's less stressful. You don't have to worry about, oh no, what's this going to present with? Well, it's just you. It's just life. What seems different only seems different because of your filters that are your database that's going, what? Calm down. It's all the same stuff. In fact, it's pretty interesting how this same stuff can look so different. Equanimity. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. It helps grow the Sangha. Those of you who are buying ebooks off threefoldlotus.com or print books off Lulu, or donating through Patreon and PayPal, just got a new patron. Thank you so much. It's vital. It really, really is vital to keep this whole thing going. So deep appreciation. Please take care of your health. Be kind. And I'll see you in the next one. Okay? Thank you. Bye-bye. Or bye for now.